Great. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Vice Chair Jazz Lewis, myself, and the entire Capital Budget Subcommittee, I want to thank everyone for being here today. We will go ahead and start with the Department of Agriculture, and our budget analyst is Mr. Andrew Gray.
Mr. Chair, I'll now present the Maryland Department of Agriculture's, or MDA's, PAYGO capital analysis. On page 1, you see the overall picture, the capital improvement program, CIP, for MDA. In fiscal 2025, there's that $44.5 million. In terms of the budget comparison, Exhibit 1 on page 5 kind of shows you the difference between 2024 and 2025 for the two programs in MDA's allowance. This is the Maryland Agricultural Land Preservation Program and the Maryland Agricultural Cost Share Program. What you're seeing here, particularly the decrease for the Maryland Agricultural Land Preservation Program, is a result of the transfer tax. We're seeing a large decrease due to the reduction in the revenue estimate for fiscal 25. And then we're also seeing an underattainment of revenues from fiscal 2023. So that was the amount we thought we were going to receive in fiscal 23. We budgeted that amount, but we received quite a bit less. And that's then applied to fiscal 2025 to kind of true up the revenues. As a result, you're seeing a lot less revenue going into the Maryland Agricultural Land Preservation Program for agricultural easement purchases. In terms of the changes for the Maryland Agricultural Cost Share Programs, there are $4 million increase in general obligation bonds for that purpose. Moving now directly to the program summary, page 6, big picture there. One of the things to note here in terms of the agencies had some challenges with staffing for the program, and it's heartening to hear that they're doing a lot better in terms of how their staffing levels for that purpose. In terms of some concerns on page 8, the program has not been able to use federal agricultural easement conservation program funding for a number of years now due to some of the restrictions and constraints on that funding. The hope is that the 2023 Farm Bill may take away some of those constraints or improve the situation to allow for that federal funding to be used. However, that Farm Bill has been pushed out till September 2024, so we won't see any movement on that for quite a while. Moving now to Maryland Agricultural Cost Share Program, page 9, the overall increase, $4 million to $8 million in general obligation bonds for fiscal 2025. GLS does note, though, that the Maryland Agricultural Cost Share Program has not been able to encumber the full amount of its annual appropriate authorizations in a timely manner. Therefore, it appears that there's a possibility for a $3 million reduction in that general obligation bond authorization. And since there's money available from the prior year, around $3 million from fiscal 2024 as a current plan, that would still allow for $8 million for fiscal 2025. Just one note here about effectiveness in terms of kind of managing for results measures. Exhibit 3 on page 11 shows the information about the percent of natural filters practices implemented. So the hope was that you would see an increase in the number of practices implemented, particularly because there's 100% funding provided for that purpose. So it increased from 87.5% to 100% through Chapter 120 a couple of years ago. However, we're not seeing that increase in the number of the percent of natural filters practices implemented. Therefore, DLS recommends that MDA comment on the lack of an increase and comment on why max funding is not being spatially targeted as well to address some of the concerns with at the farm or field level. It's based on the additional information and data that's available now. That's any questions. That concludes the presentation.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Gray. Are there any questions from members of the subcommittee for Mr. Gray on the analysis? Great. This afternoon we have from the Department of Agriculture, Secretary of Agriculture, Mr. Kevin Addix. Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, for being here. And if you have anyone else you'd like to come up with you, that'd be great.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I have to your right, Michelle Cable, who runs our Maryland Ag Land Preservation Foundation, and to your left, Hans Schmidt, who is our Assistant Director for Resource Conservation. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to address our budget and the important work that we're doing within the agency. The budget before you reflects MDA's mission to provide leadership and to support our agriculture communities and in turn, all citizens of Maryland. But it also reflects the core values of the Moore-Miller administration to make Maryland one of the greenest states, if not the greenest state in the country, by supporting and expanding our agricultural programs that improve soil health, that actively preserve agricultural land, and provide fresh and local food to all Marylanders, and to restore our treasured Chesapeake Bay. Before you, there are two programs that receive capital funding, and these are instrumental in doing all of the above. First is the Maryland Ag Land Preservation Foundation, which purchases agricultural preservation easements that forever restrict development on prime farmland and woodland, and that preserved land is in 23 counties across our state. And number two is the Agricultural Cost Share Program, MAX, which provides farmers with grants to cover up to 100% of the cost to install conservation practices across the farm. These practices help to manage soil erosion, keep nutrients on the farm, safeguard water quality in streams, rivers, and of course, our beloved Chesapeake Bay. These programs are huge investments that preserve and protect our land and our water resources now and forever. We understand and appreciate the challenges facing your committee this legislative session, addressing a structural deficit that both you, the legislature, and our governor have inherited. We very much appreciate the critical investment that is in the capital budget for both of these programs. Mr. Gray did an excellent job of summarizing the notable accomplishments. We do want to point out a few things and answer some of the questions. First of all, Mr. Gray mentioned that the total capital appropriation for fiscal year 25 for MALF is $36.5 million. He noted the differences between our FY24 budget and what is before you now. First of all, fewer general funds. And that is, as was noted, there was a 16.5 million lump sum in 24 for the MALF program, which was in large part a final payback from the Maryland Great Outdoors Act of 2022. And MALF typically does not receive general funds. Last year was an anomaly. Secondly, there are many fewer special funds. The decrease is a reflection of underperforming real estate market and adjustments to take into account over and under attainment of revenue actually collected in the prior fiscal year. What is budgeted each fiscal year is based on two factors. First of all, protection on how analysts believe the market will perform, and an adjustment based on what was actually attained from the previous year. The decrease in these special funds will in no way harm the program from performing its mission, and that's important to note. For MAX, the total capital appropriation in 25 was $8 million. And while we appreciate Mr. Gray's hard work in producing the analysis, we respectfully disagree on his recommendation to cut the MAX program by $3 million. A couple of reasons. First of all, given the anticipated requests and focus on particular areas and practices, we anticipate the program will need the full $8 million for fiscal 25. Next, component costs for BMPs, best management practices, have increased dramatically since 2020. In order to address these cost increases and show progress in meeting our WIP goals, MDA increased cost share rates to 100% for some of the best management practices. Some of the BMPs, such as ag drainage management, are very costly to implement, but are highly effective in reducing nitrogen. In fiscal 22 and 23, MDA encumbered over $9.6 million each year for MAX projects on farms, and the $3 million cut would have negative implications to Maryland agriculture in meeting its WIP goals. I did want to point out something that Mr. Gray noted. There has been a report. Some of you are very attuned to the Bay program. The CSER report came out and noted that while we have made progress, there is a rethinking needed on how we are going to make progress in the future. So we've proactively begun evaluating how to change our programs from best management practices for all, basically on demand for farmers who are willing to put in these practices, to a more focused, targeted approach. So we're excited to give that a try. We're also working with sponsors of bills, Delegate Love and Senator Elfreth, who have put in legislation, a best in show program to truly spatially target these grants, these max cost share grants. So it's, if I could just talk about how they operate on the field now, if I'm a farmer in Frederick County, I have the same opportunity to get a cost share grant for a manure storage shed or for some of the drainage programs as would a farmer on the Eastern Shore. The best in show concept, the spatially targeting, will require looking at it differently and prioritizing, saying, okay, where is it that we've got the most runoff, or where is it that we've got the poorest stream or river quality? And let's target those areas so that, to put it colloquially, we can make real progress, improve a stream, delist a stream, cut the ribbon, have a cake, move on to the next stream, so that we're getting a little more community buy-in than just a practice here, a practice there, but truly targeting it, getting everybody involved. And we hope to see some major progress in the future, looking at it from that new lens. So that's a very high level overview of our budget. I very much appreciate our partnership with the legislature. Everybody thinks of agriculture as just farming, but we have these great programs that not only are preserving that farmland, but we are encouraging the growing of food. We're encouraging the economic development in rural areas across the state. And we've got a lot of other programs that the Operating Budget Committee heard as well, weights and measures and mosquito control and all of those fun things. But very excited to be here for these two programs. Happy to take any questions, and I've got the experts here to dive deep.
Great. Thank you very much, Secretary Addix. Do we have any questions from members of the subcommittee? Delegate Grice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A lot of folks still really don't understand sort of the topography of the Eastern Shore, where obviously it's very flat. But when you get a storm event, that water has to go somewhere. And so I guess the first way to capture nutrients is to keep it on the field to begin with, right? And so we have our best practices in those regards with cover crops and other best management practices. But sometimes when you have a bad enough storm event, those nutrients will move off the field, and the next place they typically go will be in a ditch or a tax ditch. They don't go directly into the rivers. They don't go directly into the streams. They go through a tax ditch next. And there are ways that you can capture those nutrients on their way to a river or stream. And I think that's what you're referring to. I mean, this is money that you get a big bang for your buck. This is the low hanging fruit when it comes to using resources to clean up the bay. Is that what I'm hearing?
You said it.
All right. Thank you.
Delegate Ivy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for your work on your presentation today and for coming down and visiting the wonderful 47th District. There was a proposal to cut the budget by, was it $3 million? Could you talk to us about what that would mean for some of the progress that has been taking place over the years?
On Schmidt?
Yeah. So I think as the Bay program is looking at, as we're trying to meet our WIP goals, more and more is being asked of ag to meet those goals. Agriculture is the largest land use in Maryland. And so as as being the largest land use, there needs to be more BMPs that are implemented and put on the ground. We have, as Secretary Addix has mentioned, we have tweaked the programs to help farmers better incentivize or better help pay for those practices on the ground. And as the CESA report identifies that we need to target specific areas where there's heavier loads, we need to look at those programs and how those practices and how we can take those high priority practices and put those, incentivize them above just the cost. Because our max program, being bonds, only pay for the cost. They don't pay for any additional incentives to the farmers. And so when we're asking farmers to take land out of production to put these practices on, whether it's buffers or hedgerows or waterways or whatever it may be, that's a huge cost to the farmers. And so to reduce that $3 million, that kind of slows down the progress that we need to make by 2025. And then what we need to do beyond 2025. Those fundings we anticipate based off historical, our third quarter, our fourth quarter are our largest requests for funds. That's the largest request where we'll go to the Board of Public Works to ask. So we do anticipate that we will need that whole $8 million to help our farmers put those practices on the ground.
Thank you for the answer there. And it's not just farmers who are impacted. A lot of the runoff from the Bay ends up in my district in the Port Towns and Prince George's. So I really appreciate the work that you've done and for showing up where people often don't. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for the secretary? Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. I
Thank you.
appreciate it. That ends the budget hearing for the Department of Agriculture. The next department will be Department of Juvenile Services, and our budget analyst is Ms. Madeline Miller. Oh, excuse me, before we continue with that, actually, we do have two witnesses for Department of Agriculture's budget hearing. Do we have Owen Bailey and Rachel Jones? Okay. Okay, great. Sorry about that. Mr. Owen Bailey? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, members of the committee. My name is Owen Bailey. I'm the Director of Land Use and Policy for the Eastern Shore Land Conservancy, as well as the Chair for Partners for Open Space. I'm here to voice our support for the governor's appropriation. ESLC is the largest land trust in the state, having protected 60,000 acres between Cecil and Dorchester counties on the Eastern Shore. And Partners for Open Space is a statewide coalition advocating for and defending open space in Maryland and protecting the transfer tax and the various programs that it funds, such as the Maryland Agricultural Land Protection Foundation. MALF is a vital program for protecting the best farming soils in the state. Maryland has been a leader in the U.S. in this effort, with other states looking to replicate our successful model. And through FY23, MALF has preserved over 355,000 acres of land using preservation easements. Demand for MALF funding is still high, with more applications than funds available. And with this year being an underattainment and decrease of funds, as you've heard, the transfer tax is more important. This has been a powerful mechanism in achieving our goals set forth in the Maryland The Beautiful Act passed just last year. We are close to achieving 30 by 30 thanks to programs like this. And if we have any hope to achieving our 40 by 40 goals, we're going to need funding through programs like MALF. Funding for MALF is also essential in leveraging outside funding for land protection within the state of Maryland. Thank you for your time.
Very much, Mr. Bailey. Are there any questions, Mr. Bailey? Delegate Grice.
Thank you. Actually, I think you made a pretty good point, and how MALF actually will differentiate between higher yield ground compared to lower yield ground. And it's actually a very important conversation when we're talking about solar and where we're going to place solar in the future.
Yes.
And so can you comment on that in particular?
Absolutely. I believe I've heard Secretary Ag say in the past that ag is the highest and best use of our healthy soils in the state. We can't grow more ground, like we can't make more ground. And Maryland has some very, very healthy soils that are very, very productive. Looking into the future, we're going to see a loss of agricultural land through sea level rise, saltwater intrusion, pressure for developments as we try to address the housing crisis, increase of warehousing on the Eastern Shore, eventually data centers and others. So using programs like MALF to protect our most productive soils is going to be critical if we are going to be able to grow food in our future. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. That concludes the budget hearing for Department of Agriculture. We'll now move on to Department of Juvenile Services and our budget analyst, Ms. Madeline Miller. Ms. Miller, thank you for being here, and whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Today I'll be presenting the DLS capital budget analysis of the Department of Juvenile Services. The Capital Improvement Program provides funding for one project, the Maryland Youth Residence Center renovation and expansion in fiscal 2025. The DJS capital program is most often used to support youth residential facilities like community residential, secure detention, and committed treatment facilities. A discussion of detention and committed populations and bed space begins on page 3 of the document. Exhibit 1, which provides trends for the average daily population of detained youth, appears on page 4. ADP is shown for youth who are predisposition, those who are waiting for a placement, and those who are detained but will be processed through the adult court system. Total detained ADP fell prior to the pandemic, but actions taken in fiscal 2020 caused ADP to fall 39.1% between fiscal 2020 and 2021. Fiscal 24 year-to-date levels are now 3.8% higher than in fiscal 2020. This growth is largely attributable to the adult court authorized population, which now makes up 61% of the detained ADP. On page 5, Exhibit 2 compares the rated capacity of DJS's detention facilities to its fiscal 2023 ADP. There were 341 beds available at the start of the fiscal year. The department spent most of the year with a capacity of 312 beds, though, following the closure of a facility in October of 2022. The ADP was well below the total capacity, as will be discussed later in this analysis. Further increases to the detention populations in fiscal 2024 could necessitate operational changes. The ADP trends for the department's committed populations can be found in Exhibit 3 on page 6. State-operated placements are programs at facilities owned and operated by DJS. This population saw a 46.8% increase in fiscal 2023, though utilization of this placement type remains 37.1% lower in year-to-date data compared with pre-pandemic levels. The current state-operated average daily population is 75.4 youths in fiscal 2024 year-to-date data. State-run committed residential facilities do not provide adequate capacity to accommodate the number of youths requiring out-of-home placements, nor do they provide the full complement of programming required to address the variety of treatment needs for the committed populations. To that end, DJS contracts with private in-state and out-of-state vendors to provide services to committed youth. The private per diem average daily population decreased by 19.1 youth, or 24.1%, between fiscal 22 and 23. Since fiscal 2014, the private per diem ADP has fallen at approximately 90.1%. During the pandemic, DJS made efforts to bring youth back in state and reduce the number of placements made out of state. These efforts were successful and have been continued. Fiscal 2023 and estimated 24 data are 82.4% and 84.3% lower than in fiscal 2019. Overall, in fiscal 23, the committed average daily population rose by 4.5%, with almost all of the growth coming from placements in state-operated facilities. Growth is expected to continue in fiscal 24, and a comparison of the bed space and ADP usage is provided in Exhibit 4 on page 8. The total committed bed space was approximately 84 during fiscal 23, and facilities operated at an average of 85.9% capacity in fiscal 23. The CIP includes one project which would increase bed capacity for committed treatment facilities. That is the MYRC. Information about this project can be found on pages 9 and 10. The MYRC project plans to renovate and expand a DJS-owned evening reporting center in Baltimore City to create a 24-bed hardware-secure treatment facility for male youth. $1.43 million for planning is provided in fiscal 25, with an estimated total cost being $46.1 million. This project is intended to replace the planned Cheltenham Youth Treatment Center that was to be co-located on the grounds of the Cheltenham Youth Detention Center. The CYTC would have had a 48-bed capacity and increased the available committed treatment facility capacity for male and female youth by 40 and 8, respectively. As scheduled, the design phase for the MYRC would begin in December 2024, and construction would begin in December of 2026. It has not yet received Program Part 1 approval from the Department of Budget and Management. Any delays to the approval process could result in a later design phase start date. DJS is currently reviewing its long-term capital needs, which may be greater than when this project was requested. Jumping forward in the analysis document to the issue section, a comparison of detention and committed treatment utilization rates is shown in Exhibit 5 on page 10. The capacity of detention and committed treatment facilities decreased from 411 and 214 in fiscal 2019 to 312 and 84 in fiscal 2024. On different occasions, facilities were closed or populations were moved to bring youth closer to their communities, to provide better services for female youth, to address staffing issues, and because of poor facility conditions. The utilization rate of detention and committed treatment facilities has increased from 63.8% and 61.2% in fiscal 2019 to 84.1% and 89.7% in year-to-date data. While operating in fewer facilities allows the department to consolidate its staff and save on other operational costs, it is unusual for the department to operate at utilization levels this high. Fluctuations or an continued increase in the population levels could pose significant challenges. DLS asks that the department comment on whether it plans to reopen any recently closed facilities to support population needs in fiscal 24 and in fiscal 25, or if it plans to adjust detention and committed treatment facility capacity in any way. As DJS population needs have changed, the department has also reevaluated its plans for building facilities for female youth and placing girls around the state. First, a detention center was going to be built in Carroll County. Then the site changed to the Cheltenham campus. Then it was changed to a new wing for the CYDC. And to accommodate these changes and in response to other facilities being closed, the female youth population have been moved several times around the state. This continues as the department seeks to consolidate the girls into fewer facilities. At the start of fiscal 24, female youth were housed at the CYDC and the female youth were located at the Victor Cullen Center, and the detained female youth were housed at CYDC and the Lower Eastern Shore Children's Center. All detained female youth were moved to the Western Maryland Children's Center in October. Both projects deauthorized by the fiscal 2025 capital bill, the Cheltenham Youth Detention Center addition for females and the previously mentioned CYTC would have included bed space for female youth on the grounds at Cheltenham. Because the ADP for female youth is approximately 8 in fiscal 2024 year-to-date data, this means that 7.7% of detention bed space is for female youth, who make up about 3% of the total detention population. DJS should clarify where female youth in the state-operated committed treatment facility would currently be placed and comment on the plan for housing its female detained and committed populations in the remainder of fiscal 24 and in fiscal 25. DLS also asked that the department comment on its long-term housing plan for female youth, given its goal of locating youth closer to their families. The most recently prepared facilities master plan for the department is from calendar 2015, though DJS reports that it expects to prepare a new facilities master plan by December 31st of this year. The department is also reviewing its needs in relation to proposed juvenile justice legislation this session. DLS is concerned that as the department evaluates its needs and develops a new facilities master plan, this could result in changes to the MYRC project's scope and the department's priorities for capital spending. Therefore, DLS recommends deleting the design funding for the MYRC renovation and expansion project. The CIP includes funding for one out-year project as well, the Charles H. Hickey New Combined Services Building. Since its inclusion in the previous CIP, the estimated cost of the project has decreased about 2% to $19.5 million, with initial design funding planned for fiscal 2028. A summary of the key observations and the DLS recommended action to delete funding for the MYRC can be found on page 2. That concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to take any questions at this time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Miller. Are there any questions from the subcommittee for Ms. Miller on the analysis? This afternoon, we have from the Department of Juvenile Services, Secretary of Juvenile Services, Vincent Schiraldi. Secretary, thanks for being here. You can bring up anyone who you want to.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Vice Chairman, and members of the committee. I'm Vinny Schiraldi, Secretary for the Department of Juvenile Services, joined today by Maria Martin, Director of Capital Planning, and Kara Annenson, Legislative Director. I'd like to thank Ms. Miller for her thoughtful and thorough analysis. DJS has one capital project to review and, as mentioned, 2 issues to address. First, in response to the recommendation to delete the design funding for MYRC renovation and expansion project, we respectfully request to maintain the design funding for the MYRC renovation and expansion project. We're committed to completing a facility master plan, but can't envision a plan that does not include access to residential treatment in Baltimore City. Currently, DJS does not operate any residential treatment programs in the Baltimore metropolitan area. And all DJS treatment facilities are located in Maryland's western region. In FY 2023, Baltimore City made up the largest percentage of placements in each of DJS's treatment programs, specifically 28% of placements at the Backbone Youth Center, which is in Garrett County, 25% of the placements at the Greenridge Youth Center, which is in Washington County, and 40% of placements at the Victor Cullen Center, which is in northern Frederick County near the Pennsylvania border, are a result of cases originating in Baltimore City. This long-standing problem requires that all Baltimore City youth committed for treatment and rehabilitative services receive those interventions far from their homes, communities, families, and natural supports that are proven to enhance the likelihood of positive outcomes. The established research is clear. Isolation from the community negatively impacts committed youth. Serving youth closer to their homes and communities increases opportunities for families, caregivers, mentors, and relatives to actively participate in treatment and play a critical role in meeting short and long-term rehabilitative goals. Moreover, serving youth in or near their community allows for positive transitions and stronger connections when youth are returning to their homes, families, and schools. Close proximity to educational programs, behavioral health supports, and community-based programming allows for meaningful and continuous engagement with service providers and ultimately supports the implementation of a reentry plan built together with these crucial support systems. Beginning the design process to renovate and expand MYRC is necessary to support youth from the Baltimore City region and contribute to positive public safety outcomes. Delaying the access to design funds will result in even more time before Baltimore City youth have access to local residential treatment services. Now on to the two issues. DJS was asked to comment on whether it plans to reopen any recently closed facilities to support population needs in fiscal 24 and 25, or if it plans to adjust detention and committed treatment facility capacity in any way. At this time, DJS does not plan on reopening any recently closed facilities to support population needs in fiscal 24 and 25. Second, DJS was asked to clarify where female youth in a state-operated committed treatment facility would be placed and comment on the plan for housing its female detained and committed populations in the remainder of fiscal 24 and 25. DJS should also comment on its long-term housing plan for female youth, given its goal of locating youth closer to their families. Serving girls is a top priority for this administration, and to that end, we're taking the following steps. We consolidated all committed and detained girls to one location at the Western Maryland Children's Center this year. Detained girls were in multiple detention centers across the state, and committed girls were in a unit at Victor Cullen. When you put a few girls into a boys' facility, it's a boys' facility. It's not a girls' facility. So that's why we tried to pull them all together and did. All staff at WMCC are trained in providing gender-responsive care, and the program interventions are designed to meet the diverse need of the girls we serve. Secondly, we received technical assistance from a group with national expertise specifically regarding girls' residential and community programming provided by the Federal Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. And then third, we acknowledge the need to address the female committed population and are exploring options as we develop the facility master plan. Thanks for your time, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Very much, Secretary Schiraldi. Are there any questions from member of the Capital Budget Subcommittee for Secretary Schiraldi? Delegate Solomon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Secretary, it's nice to see you again, and I appreciated your office reaching out in advance. I just had a question. As you're thinking through the facilities master plan, I know we're moving away from sort of more of the inpatient treatment. Obviously, if it's warranted, yes. But as we're thinking about ramping up, obviously, pretty significantly the amount of services that we can provide to children across the state, are you thinking in your facilities master plan, which typically would only think through sort of state-owned facilities, are you thinking about, as we expand services with nonprofit providers and other providers across the state, obviously operating dollars are really important, but if you have a center that's, working with 20 kids now and is going to need to work with 40 or 60 kids going forward, they're going to need capital expenditures to increase the size, to outfit new centers. So again, while the master facilities plan is really just state-owned, are you all thinking with the rest of the administration holistically about what kind of capital needs beyond just the operating dollars might be required to get those nonprofit and community providers up and running?
Yeah, so it's not even just facilities. So your question was about whether it's just state-owned facilities? No, it's not. It's us and private facilities and facilities operated by other departments. So one of the points that was raised in the analysis by Ms. Miller is an increase in committed youth. Maryland has no adolescent residential drug treatment program. We literally don't have one bed for a kid with a drug problem. And judges have told us that we're committing kids to you that we would put into drug treatment, but we don't have drug treatment. So it's not even just us. Secretary Herrera Scott's talking about opening a residential drug treatment program for adolescents. We think that'll ease some of the pressure. But then also during this time, sort of as a partner with the facility master plan, we're going to expand and analyze our continuum of community-based programs. Sometimes judges will commit a kid to residential that could be served in the community, but I don't think they have enough confidence, particularly throughout the state, in the kind of non-residential programs that we have available. So we have to do that. We have to move it all at once, because if we overinvest in residential is very expensive, then we won't have the money to do the community programs. So we're going to constantly go back and forth with state's attorneys, judges, and defense attorneys to see what do we need in the community, and then, okay, what kids would be left that need to be in residential? How many of them could go to private, nonprofit, sort of staff secure facilities? And then how many, sort of state-run beds do we need?
So then hopefully shortly we should see a master use facility plan that encompasses potentially capital dollars coming from the state going to a whole variety of providers.
That's right. And that's what, that's what architects do when they try to forecast the size of a building you need. They say, okay, what else do you have?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Solomon, Vice Chair Lewis.
Thank you, Secretary, and your team. It's always a pleasure and appreciate the thorough analysis, both by you and Madeline over there. So my question is regarding to the Baltimore City facility that's being developed. We've heard from some of the folks who live close to there that we just appreciate very close communication with the communities that will live in the shadow to just make sure they're not an afterthought. I think the entire committee is committed to making sure that treatment is close to where people live so that they can maintain that connection to their family and services. I think that, what's in the best interest of that child is most important. But if you all can continue to engage with the communities where the facility would be, it'd be greatly appreciated, not just from the subcommittee chair, but also from the Baltimore City delegation. Thank you.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Lewis, Delegate Rice.
Okay, Solomon's question. So I know we have group homes throughout the state. Do we offer drug treatment in those group homes? And if we do, is it a potential option if we're going to make a capital investment to actually add square footage to those group homes and also probably add some more some more bodies to help them with that?
Yeah, I think it's possible to expand the group homes that tend not to be the kinds of drug treatment programs you'd want to send a kid where that was their real problem.
Right.
But I suspect that when we come back to you with a master plan next year, it'll have some expansion of group home beds as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here, your transparency, and for showing up early and often. You mentioned residential treatment versus community-based rehabilitation. Could you talk to us about the differences there programmatically, and then second, about the costs that it takes to start some of these different programs?
Thank you. That's a great question. So I'll give you one example. We started the Thrive Academy this year, which some of you may have heard about, focused on young people on our caseload that are the highest risk of committing or coming to harm from gun violence. And that is about $14,500 per kid. And that will involve us assigning a life coach to that young person, and a special life coach that we contract for that's formerly incarcerated and has been specially trained, and a specially trained case manager. as well as being able to help that young person go to school or vocational training, get a stipended job or apprenticeship, move if their family is in danger, and get trauma therapy. And that 14,500 is one of our more intensive and expensive programs. And that compares to $400,000 per bed per year, between $400,000 and $500,000 in residential. So some kids still have to be in custody, right? You
Sure.
can't eliminate that completely, but I think it's better for kids to be, if we can make it work in a community, and it's certainly cost effective.
14,000 per kid versus 400,000. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from members of the Capital Budget Subcommittee for Secretary Ciraldi? Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here. That concludes the budget hearing for Department of Juvenile Services. The committee will now move on to the Department of Veterans Affairs. And the budget analyst is Ms. Yashidora Rai.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and the members of the committee. I am Yashudhara Rai, and I'll be presenting the capital budget analysis for the Department of Veterans Affairs, or MDVA. On page 1, we have the capital improvement program through fiscal 29, which includes 3 projects. The Crownsville Veterans Cemetery Expansion and Improvement Phase 4. This is a new project starting in fiscal 25 with a request of $1.1 million in general obligation GO bonds. The new state veterans home in Sykesville is an ongoing project with a fiscal 25 request of approximately $48 million in PAYGO federal fund, and the Garrison Forest Veterans Cemetery Expansion and Improvements Phase 6 project, which is an out-year state-owned project with no funding request for fiscal 25. Pages 3 to 8 highlights the 2 projects programmed into the 24 CIP. The Crownsville Veterans Cemetery is expected to exhaust its columbarium space by fiscal 28 and requires an expansion of its columbarium structures and burial capacity. While other phases of the project have received fundings in the past CIPs, Phase 4 receives its first allocation in fiscal 25. This expansion project will add approximately 5,000 cascaded grave sites and approximately 2,200 niche columbariums to meet the anticipated burial needs for a minimum of 10 years. The expansion includes construction of a new administration building and a 4-bay maintenance garage, including parking space. Site enhancements include improving existing irrigation system, stormwater management system, and landscaping. The fiscal 25 includes $1.1 million in GO bonds provided by the state for the design of this project. This will be reimbursed through the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, USDVA, Veterans Cemetery Grant Program, and construction will be entirely federally funded. This recommendation of $1.1 million in fiscal 25 is $297,000 more than the requested amount because the USDVA requires 10% of the total estimated project cost upfront to make the project eligible for the Veterans Cemetery Grant Program. The fiscal 25 budget includes funding to begin design and construction. Design is expected to begin in September 2024 and end in November 2025. Construction is expected to begin in July 2026 and end in July 2028. DLS notes that the CIP program's construction funds in fiscal 26 and 27, but the project schedule suggests that the construction funds will not be required until fiscal 27. The operating budget impact of this project is expected to cost approximately $161,000 in fiscal 28 and approximately $176,000 in fiscal 29. Page 5 highlights the second project programmed into the 2024 CIP. This is a 128-bed new state veterans home at Sykesville, which provides additional bed space for Maryland's veterans that will be more centrally located and closer to health facilities. The total funding required for the project from fiscal 25 to fiscal 27 is $129 million. The project has received approximately $70 million in general fund for planning and construction since the beginning of the project in June 2022 through fiscal 24. The fiscal 25 budget includes approximately $47.9 million in PAYGO federal funds for construction and equipment procurement. The project design started in July 2023 and is expected to end in November 2024. The schematic designs were received on February 1st of this year, and the Department of General Services is expected to complete reviewing it by the end of this month. Construction is expected to begin in March 2025 and end in September 2027. This project is eligible for the Federal State Home Construction Grant, which is a program that shares the cost of new veterans' homes with the states. In June 2023, the project was listed on the Priority 1 list, but was not selected for funding in fiscal 24. The federal fiscal 25 grant priority list is expected to be published between January and April 2024, which provides an opportunity to receive federal funding for this project. MDVA intends to meet all project requirements for a conditional grant award that includes having at least 35% drawings and environmental assessment review completed. While the schematic design was received in February, we request the department to provide an update on the environmental assessment review and if it is on track to submit all the required documents for the conditional award. The department should also comment on its contingency plan if the project is not selected for federal funding in federal fiscal 25. Also, the first architectural and engineering cost, the AE cost estimate, was received by the department and notes that the estimates were higher than the design to budget estimate. The department reported that the DGS project manager is working to revise the drawings to identify efficiencies. We request the department to comment on the impact of this revision on its submission of required documents for the federal grant and the overall project schedule. Exhibit 1 on page 7 shows the state's veteran population by county, the location of the current home, and the planned location of the future home. The USDVA estimate for Maryland's veteran population shows a statewide decline from 356,000 in calendar 2022 to 348,000 in calendar 2023, or 2% decline. Page 8 outlines the department's long-term plan of moving the residents of the current Charlotte Hall facility into the new facility at Sykesville and renovate Charlotte Hall while being partially occupied. Page 8 also outlines the outer project not programmed in 2024 CIP, the Garrison Forest Veterans Cemetery Expansion and Improvements Phase 6. This project adds an estimated 4,200 pre-placed crypts, 2,300 columbrium wall niches, and 1,700 in-ground cremains plots. This project received its first funding in fiscal 23 and was previously estimated to be completed in fiscal 27. Due to a delay in the project schedule, funding scheduled for fiscal 25 is deferred to fiscal 26, and the project is now expected to be completed in fiscal 28. MDVA notes that the Veterans Cemetery grant application for this project has been received by USDVA and expects to receive an update on the application status on or after July 1st, 2024. DLS recommends concurring with the governor's allowance for PAYGO federal fund of approximately $48 million for the new state veterans home in Sykesville. DLS also recommends approving the $1.1 million in GEO bonds for the Phase 6 Crownsville Veterans Cemetery Expansion and Improvement Project to meet the federal requirement of 10% of the total estimated project cost upfront to make this Veterans Cemetery Expansion project eligible for the Veterans Cemetery Grant Program. DLS's key observations and recommendations are on page 2 of the analysis. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Rye. Are there any questions from the subcommittee for Ms. Rye on the analysis? Great. Thank you. This afternoon, we have from Department of Veterans Affairs, Secretary Anthony Woods. And Secretary, you can bring up those who you would like to bring up with you. And on our list, we have Marion Charlin, Peter Pantzer, Robert Finn, Russell Ware, and Sharon Murphy.
Yep. Okay. They're also all here, Mr. Chair.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary.
Absolutely. Chair Chang, Vice Chair Lewis, and members of the Capital Budget Subcommittee.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Tony Woods, Secretary of the Maryland Department of Veterans Affairs, and I'm joined here with the Director of Finance, Elena Charland. I want to start by thanking Yasho for her wonderful analysis. It's been a privilege to work alongside her throughout this process. I also wanted to take a moment to honor the memory of one of Maryland's truly great veteran leaders, former delegate and former Secretary George Owings III, who passed away in October. A second state veterans home was a dream of his for decades, and it's my privilege to carry on that baton throughout this process. This past year, it's been an honor to lead the department team in writing a new chapter and transforming the department to be even more responsive to the needs of our veterans and the military-connected community. We're working closely with our new Charlotte Hall contractor to implement the changes needed to bring that facility to a 5-star rating. We are simultaneously moving closer to making our new veterans home in Sykesville a reality, which will bring skilled nursing care geographically closer to many of our most vulnerable veterans. And so I'll take just a brief moment to respond to the 2 questions that Yasho raised from the DLS analysis. The first one was requesting an update on the environmental assessment. So our response is that the environmental consultant is in the process of completing the phase 2 for the environmental site assessment, or ESA. The consultant needs to perform additional soil testing on nearby properties. The assessment should be completed within the next few weeks. The NEPA report should then be completed 2 weeks after that ESA. If the project is not selected for federal funding in fiscal year 2025, my department will continue to work with our federal delegation to stress the urgency of ensuring funding as soon as possible. We will also review our federal grant application for opportunities to make adjustments that might move this project further up the priority list. Additionally, we will explore other options within the state to address the bed shortage that might meet the needs of our veterans here in the state that are cost effective and are likely to leverage federal funds. The second question was with regard to a revision to the drawings to identify efficiencies. And so to that end, while the A&E needed to reduce the square footage after the schematic design submission, the A&E is still on track with the design development submission. This is not unusual early in this stage of the design process. So the A&E team is working diligently to bring the project back into the programmed square footage. Reducing the square footage will help to bring the cost estimate back to an acceptable range. So those are the 2 responses there. I'll close simply by saying we're again partnering with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs to expand capacity at the Crownsville Cemetery so that we can continue to provide a final resting place for Maryland's veterans and dependents for years to come. So I recognize that you have many presentations today, and I want to respect your time, so I'll wrap there and simply say that we are in full support of the governor's allowance and we'll be happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Secretary Woods. Would you like to provide any comments, ma'am? Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from members of the subcommittee for Secretary Woods? Delegate Metzger.
Thank you, Secretary Woods. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just more of a statement than question. I have to tell you, Secretary Woods, when I met you, I said you had very big shoes to fill with Secretary Owens, and what a delightful man he was. He came to our district on many times. I've had several occasions that I've had veterans town halls, and we proudly say that Maryland has the most beautiful final resting places for our veterans than anywhere in Maryland. My father-in-law is laid out at Crownsville, and he was a pastor that did not know he had cancer, but 2 months prior to him passing away, he laid the rest one of his best friends. And as you know, in Crownsville, they're laid according to, and where he's laid out is right beside his friend. So I just, the cemeteries in our state, ladies and gentlemen, for veterans, you need to do yourself a favor and see how we honor them on their resting day. It's incredible. God bless you.
Well, Delegate Metzger, first let me offer condolences at the passing of your father-in-law, and I will simply say it's a privilege
for us to provide that final resting place and to maintain it. And just for the subcommittee's awareness, we also host what are called unaccompanied burials, where if a veteran doesn't have family or friends, we bring them to our cemeteries and have services available. So we'll make you aware of those opportunities to join those. They happen quarterly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Delegate Metzger, for your comments and for sharing that. Are there any other questions from members of the subcommittee for Secretary Woods and the Maryland Department of Veterans Affairs? Secretary Woods, thank you very much for being here, and thank you very much for honoring your predecessor, Secretary Owens. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
That concludes the budget hearing for the Department of Veterans Affairs. The committee will now move on to the Maryland State Library Agency, and our budget analyst is Ms. Natalia Andrade.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. My name is Natalie Andrade, and I'm here with the Department of Legislative Services to present the capital budget for the Maryland State Library Agency. And to start on page 1, this chart shows that the capital grant project totals $12 million, from which $7.5 million are a mandated amount per Chapter 27 of 2021. And it also includes an additional $4.5 million allocated to previously funded projects to support ongoing design and to advance construction according to project schedules. Exhibit 1 on pages 3, 4, and 5 shows the list of projects that will be funded in fiscal 2025. The proposed budget includes 7 projects with the grants ranging from $131,000 to $2.8 million. The estimated cost of this project is $74.4 million, including $3.8 million in prior authorizations, and $979,000 in projected future requests. 5 projects have been received funds previously, and 2 projects are newly funded in fiscal 2025. As I mentioned before, we have here a total of $979,000 in anticipated future requests to complete 2 of these projects, and therefore supplemental funding may not be needed in fiscal 2026. And most of the $7.5 million base funding will be available to fund new projects. So MSLA should comment on the anticipated supplemental request for future fiscal years and discuss the strategies for managing its future project pipeline to mitigate the need for supplemental funding above the mandate in the future. On page 6, there is an update related to the delay in the new Pocomoke Library project. The fiscal 24 capital budget provided $2.2 million in construction funding for the Worcester County New Pocomoke Library, but the project was deferred due to changes in location and environmental concerns. Due to multiple deferrals since fiscal 2020, Worcester County opted to proceed promptly with the project by constructing a new facility on the existing library site. Regarding the environmental concerns, an underground fuel oil tank was removed in June 2023, and the risk assessment for the new construction has been completed by the Maryland Department of the Environment on September 26, 2023. Design work is underway using local funds, and the project costs have been reduced from $10.9 million to $9.4 million. And the fiscal 25 budget includes a further $1.8 million for the project. Here we have the issues section, and the first issue that we want to present to the committees is related to the status of the fiscal 24 projects. And you can see here in Exhibit 2 that shows the update as of February 2024. on the progress of the construction and renovation projects funded in fiscal 24, as I mentioned. As you can see, projects in Calvert County, the Twin Beaches branch, and in Caroline County, the Denton branch, will reach substantial completion in March and April respectively. Regarding the status of the Bel Air project, MSLA granted an extension of the fiscal 23 Bel Air branch renovation capital grant totaling $1.4 million until June 30, 2024. Any additional one-year extensions are subject to MLSA discretion. The delay is explained by the county administration's decision to postpone all county capital projects to allow time for a comprehensive review of ongoing initiatives. The agency indicated that as of December 2023, the county executive has not communicated any updates regarding the project's status. Finally, the second issue that we want to present to the committees is related to the Enoch Pratt Free Library System building status. The 23 Joint Chairman's report requested that MSLA conduct a building and facility condition analysis of all library buildings within the Enoch Pratt Free Library System. The report provides an assessment of 21 branch locations and a neighborhood design center and Baltimore City Library Maintenance Shop operated by EPFL. Exhibit 3 on page 9 shows the facility renewal cost by facility identified as necessary, potentially critical, or currently critical with an estimated total cost of $51.1 million. Within this list, MSLA have identified 7 branches as critical and necessitating immediate attention to ensure uninterrupted provision of services. These branches are represented in bold in Exhibit 3. And to conclude my presentation, we, DLS, we recommend to approve the general obligation bond authorization for the public library capital grant program. And with that, I conclude my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Andrade, for the presentation. Are there any questions for the analysis? Delegate Ivy.
For the analysis specifically, I'm just curious, with Hartford choosing to hold on what is this? The renovation project there, what's taking place with the money right now if it's not being spent this year?
Could you repeat the question, please?
I'm not sure what the dollar amount is. I think, but for the Hartford project in Bel Air, the Bel Air renovation, it says that it's on hold by the county. I just want to know what's happening with the award, the money that's already been awarded by the state.
I think that money is on hold, but I think the agency is more able to answer that question.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Andrade, for the thorough presentation. Very much appreciated. We'll have those questions directed to the MSLA and also to the local jurisdictions too. Thank you very much. And so now we will have the Miss Irene Padilla with the state librarian. And if she'd like to come up, and we also have Donna Liberto. If you have anyone else you'd like to come up with you, please.
Yes. Well, good afternoon, Chairman Chang and members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be here today. And I'm Irene Padilla, the state librarian, and with me is Donna Liberto, our Chief Operating Officer and Chief Financial Officer, and Mary Ramey, our grants coordinator. So as you know, we're here in support of the Maryland State Library Agency capital budget. And this includes the $7.5 million mandated for the program and the supplemental $4.5 million for the program, which we very much appreciate. And on behalf of the entire Maryland library community, I want to begin by thanking you for your ongoing commitment to the development of public library facilities in Maryland. Since this program's implementation in fiscal 2008, your mandate to provide $5 million and now $7.5 million a year has benefited all 24 of the state's library systems. The state's $93.8 million investment has been matched by local funds of approximately $375 million. So you can see the state funding is spurring local investment. You have our written testimony, and we very much appreciate Ms. Andrade's very thorough analysis. Thank you so much. This provides an excellent description of the program and our needs. So please refer to my written testimony for more information about the proposed projects or the 18, soon to be 21 beautiful new libraries that have opened because of this program. But before I move on, I am so happy to report that less than 2 weeks ago, we opened the Baden branch in Prince George's County. It is a beautiful gem. It's a treasure box of a branch, small but mighty. And this was made possible with $2 million from state funds. So we really appreciate that. I wanted to mention the need for increased funding while I'm here. I know that you hear a lot of these pleas, but the costs for this program continue to escalate. And we don't have much of a mandate, but we're very happy with what we do have. But we've been very pleased that we've been able to add supplemental, the state has agreed to add supplemental funds in various years as needed. A lot of it is because costs go up and costs are escalating all the time. We are asking for, as I mentioned, $12 million. And in particular, I wanted to address the issue of Baltimore City. We are asking for funds for the Forest Park Library in Baltimore City. But as you can see from the Joint Chairs report that we submitted on December 1, the needs in the city are terrific. It's hard to think about the status of those buildings and how much longer they're going to be able to stay whole. So I really would appreciate if you would turn your attention to that report at some point when you're considering more funding for Baltimore City. As the analyst mentioned, just to address the critical issues, we're looking at $51.1 million and a total of $337.5 million to fund all of the Pratt Library System's necessary repairs and improvements. In addition, a statewide capital needs assessment of all library systems conducted in November 2023 shows that in the next 2 years, 54 existing facilities require general renovation at an estimated cost of $106.6 million. And 18 buildings have been identified for replacement with a new structure at an estimated cost of $437.8 million. So the needs are out there, and we are very pleased with your support, your longstanding support for library additions and funding, and our additional supplemental increase. As far as how we can make this money stretch further, that's a very difficult question. When we have a limited pool of cash that we can apply to these needs, we're doing the best we can to prioritize within that amount. But it's the age-old question of, the longer you hold off on fixing this, then that breaks. And actually the city has some buildings that are not usable that don't open because of these problems. So that's a tough question. But we're doing the best we can, and we'll continue to do so. And we really appreciate your ongoing support. Maryland libraries would not thrive without your attention to these details. And thank you again from Maryland's Public Libraries.
Great. Thank you very much, Madam State Librarian Delegate Ivy.
Your chair. Thank you so much for the work that you've been doing, Ms. Padilla. Not only did Baden open recently, but Bladensburg also opened in Port Towns community, place that I love so much. It might be because I represent it. And again, I asked the question to the wrong person earlier, but looking at the Bel Air renovation project. It's got the largest final award in this presentation. And could you give us some sort of update on what's taking place there and if there are any plans for the funds that have been awarded?
Well, when this issue first arose last year, I would say in spring, the library director had spoken with the county executive and he was hesitant to move forward on the project, but promised that he would get back to them soon with information about how they plan to move forward. He has not done so. And we are very disappointed in that. And it's a lot of money, but we did give them an extension through the end of this fiscal year. But we have been in communication with the library director and indicating that we can't hang on to this money and that we'll have to make some hard decisions very soon about this. So hopefully she's able to convey that to our county executive, because they certainly have the need in Hartford County. And I'd hate to see them throw away this opportunity.
Thank you for the explanation. Look at me, the young guy doesn't know how to work the tech. Look, I think it's important that they get this renovation as well. If you could just make sure that they know that there are certainly many other jurisdictions that would love to have that funding come to their county. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And once again, lovely to see you, Ms. Padilla. As many people may know, this is your last time before us because you'll be heading into retirement. So first, I want to salute you for your leadership. But I also wanted to point out, I have two of those libraries that are in areas of concern in Enoch Pratt system, Clifton and Hamilton. And so I think I want to just be on the record in the Capitol hearing that if people haven't visited a library in Baltimore City or even anywhere else in the state of Maryland in a while, their notion of what's happening at a library may be a bit narrow. Libraries have definitely been community hubs and help with the intersection of a lot of social services. So I didn't know if maybe you want to speak to, particularly in Baltimore City, the types of things that happen at those buildings that are maybe oversubscribed and need better physical support.
Well, I don't have the exact details in front of me, but I can tell you that there are certain branches that do not open on a regular basis because of the HVAC and other issues that are involved there. And so it usually happens at very short notice to the public. And so people come with their children and they're disappointed. Story hour for that day is canceled and there's no opportunity to take out materials. It's fine to say that we have electronic books and other digital materials, but it's not the same as giving a storybook to a child and giving them a story time, and for which you need the facility. So we are very concerned about Enoch Pratt Free Library, and I hope that they are getting new executive director as well, and I hope that one of their main focus will be on the facilities themselves.
Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much, Delegate Smith, for the question. Are there any other questions from members of the Capital Budget Subcommittee for the Maryland State Library to see? Delegate Forbes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Ms. Padilla, for your service and your passion. We really have appreciated hearing from you all these years. And I think that I speak for the committee knowing that the 7.5 million that goes to all the libraries to share, we hear you that it's not enough. I just wanted to bring you your attention and following up on what Delegate Smith said. In Exhibit 3, you say the Hamilton branch it says the Hamilton branch of the library is 16 years old, and I think it's 65 years old. So that should be a correction that we should put on the record.
We will definitely verify that. Thank you for pointing that out.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much, Delegate Forbes, for pointing that important number out. Are there any other questions from members of the Capital Budget Subcommittee for our State Library and C? That concludes the capital budget hearing for the State Library and C, and that concludes today's budget hearing. Have a great day.